Good morning, everybody. On behalf of myself and my co-moderator, Dr. Milanese, welcome to this webinar. And today we will cover very, very important and topics that the times don't get from our neurosurgical community the type of attention that they deserve. We will hear about what are the practical implications of novel developments in artificial intelligence as they apply to neurosurgery. And then we'll cover another very important topic. It's about ergonomics, why the instruments are designed in a certain way and how to use based on their design. And we will also look at what is the place of simulation in neurosurgery. There's been a lot of advances and very, it has reached a point where it really has a very important role in the education of our future generations of neurosurgeons. I pass the stage now to my co-moderator, Dr. Milanese from São Paulo, Brazil. Vanessa, please.
Good morning, Dr. Lanzino. Good morning, everyone, Dr. Byrne, Dr. Bortolotti, Dr. Salazar, and all the audience here, neurosurgeons from all over the world. It's my great honor. Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Lanzino. It's my great honor to introduce Dr. Byrne, that is now the chairman at Mayo Clinic, Florida. He's the chairman of the Department of Neurologic Surgery in Florida. And he has a great leadership role in numerous professional societies, including president of the Neurological Society of America, director of the American Board of Neurological Surgeons, board of directors of the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, board of directors of the Congress of Neurological Surgeons, and president-elect for Society of Neurological Surgeons. I had the honor to meet him in person in last May, and I'm really looking forward to his talk about artificial intelligence in neurosurgery. Thank you so much, Dr. Byrne, for being here today with us.
Right. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm pleased to be here. I'm going to share my screen here. You guys let me know if you're seeing what I'm seeing. You see my screen?
Yes, we see it very well.
Yes.
Very good. All right. I'll be talking about artificial intelligence and neurosurgery, and just that topic alone, I could talk for many hours. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights in these 30 minutes. There's so many different topics to talk about. This is such a powerful tool. I was literally reading this morning about the politics of chip making, and I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the company of ASML, but if you bought their stock about 15, 20 years ago, you'd be a billionaire. They are, it's the Advanced Semiconductor Materials Lithography Company, and they make the background of 2/3 of the AI chips being made right now. And it's such a powerful company. And the United States has sanctions against Italy and Norway because they're sharing some of this technology with China. I mean, the politics behind this is so intense because the power is so impressive. So you'll see there's so many different things you can talk about with AI. I'm just going to talk about neurosurgery and things that you guys might find interesting this morning. So I'll just give a brief introduction about AI. We'll talk about some current state usages, some of which we're rolling out here at Mayo, Florida. Mayo is really, really deeply invested in AI. We'll take a look at some of the neurosurgical AI literature and where it might be used in the future. So just getting to the basics, I'm fascinated by and obsessed with AI because I'm a math nerd at the very base of this. this is all just advanced math, and frankly, not that advanced. It just has a lot to do with iterative sequences and things like the Fibonacci sequence, where you see just repetitive patterns, and you can pick out these patterns in nature. You see it through nature all the time. And I love the math of nature. And by the way, that math of nature very much applies to the brain. The more we look at these patterns, we see patterns that are easily explainable with these iterative sequences in neuroscience. And it's just fascinating for anybody with a math background. And in reality, AI is really just math. It's not magic. It seems magical, but it's just math, and it's just Bayesian inference and Boolean algebra and linear algebra. In fact, this is one of my favorite quotes. The rebranding of linear algebra as artificial intelligence may be the most successful marketing campaign of all time. And that is true. Linear algebra is just a massive number crunching. It's mind-numbingly boring if you're doing it, but the computers can do it with ease and extreme accuracy. And that's where the power comes from. And in reality, mathematics is the language with which God has written the universe, as Galileo said. So you get a glimpse of how things work when you really delve into AI. And I'm not the only one interested and enthused about AI. If you take a look at some of the quotes here, artificial intelligence will have more profound impact on humanity than fire, electricity, and the internet. That is a bold statement, but it's an extraordinarily powerful tool. So when you think about it, and I say it's advanced math, it's advanced statistics. So what's the difference between AI and statistics? Your standard biostatistics. This is a really good paper from the New England Journal from last year. And really what it boils down to is that AI is particularly useful for massive data sets. So we've got 10 million patient charts like Mayo Clinic does. That's just too much for standard mathematical techniques to figure out what's going on in any sort of hidden patterns. AI is extremely good at this. The downside is it's an opaque process. It's very difficult to say, how did the AI figure out what it figured out? Therefore, it's difficult to reproduce, and it's very specific to that data set and may not be reproducible on other data sets. So it's particularly useful with huge data sets where you're looking for maybe small hidden patterns. It's very interesting with novel data sets without precedent. Of course, we don't always have novel data sets. And then ideally, you'd want to have external validation to combat the problem of the black box of what happened and how did the AI figure this out. So we just take a look at this. This is not a novel data set, but it's a massive data set. When you think about it, we're looking at EEGs. EEGs just look like giant muck of squiggly lines to the uninformed. But of course, there's tiny patterns underneath. It's a summation of many, many, many patterns, and nothing picks that apart quite like AI does. So an AI program put together was tested against a panel of expert epileptologists, and guess what? The AI is every bit as accurate as a panel of expert neurologists. Just came out in JAMA Neurology last year. When I talked to our head of epileptology when I was at Rush, this is a man who'd been doing epileptology for 35 years. I said, "What do you think of this?" He said, I think I'm really glad that I'm about to retire. So that's the power that AI has for these massive data sets. AI can do things like just taking a look at, this is all fundoscopy. So we're talking about tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of fundoscopic pictures, can take a look at this. And, to you and I, we see the disc, the cup, we see the retina and so on. AI looks at this and can tell you how old the person is, whether they smoke, what their hemoglobin A1C is, what their blood pressure is. And for the first time in history, I mean, hundreds of thousands of ophthalmologists have looked at retinas. And for the first time in history, the AI figured out that just looking at a retina, you can tell a person's gender with 97% accuracy. So there's so many hidden patterns here and things that we would not pick up that AI picks up very naturally. This just came out of the Google DeepMind team. Google's DeepMind team is one of the most advanced AI programming teams in the world. These are the people who put together AlphaZero and AlphaGo, that put together the most powerful chess engines in the world. Well, they're now working on differential diagnosis for medicine, and they found that their large language model they put together was as accurate and in times more accurate than a panel of medical experts in doing differential diagnosis in really complex cases. So you see where all of this is going. This is something, if you're not interested in it, that's fine. If you think that this isn't going to affect you, you're wrong. So it's worth knowing all of this. I personally am fascinated. I can't look away from this, but I don't think anybody's going to be able to avoid it. Specific to neurosurgery, this just launched, I think it was a week and a half ago. This is Atlas GPT, Aaron Cohen-Goodall's product. By disclosure, I'm now on the board of Atlas GPT. Aaron has invited me for that. This is a large language model put together based on a 6 different layer model. So it increases the accuracy, decreases hallucinations, so the chance of it ever being wrong. When this model was tested against standard neurosurgical questions, question sets, it got 98% of the questions correct, and the ones it got wrong were probably just too vague for it to figure out. So this product just came out. It's remarkably easy to use. You can query it as a surgeon, you can query it as a medical student, query it as a lay person just trying to get answers about your condition. I found it to be remarkably easy to use and very, very accurate. So if you've got a really tough case and you want to get some advice on it, you can just put all the details of the case in. It'll think for half a minute, and then it'll give you from my experience, a very reasonable plan of attack for whatever the problem is. So this is just the first iteration of what we're seeing in neurosurgery. I do believe that this is going to be a part of what we do in the future. I do believe that these are going to be the second opinions that people can get from anywhere in the world when they have a complex problem. They can literally go to an engine like this and get a suggestion for a solution. And all literature-based, all based solely on the literature of neurosurgery. And that's based on relatively more primitive LLMs. The next LLM's coming out, ChatGPT 4.0 just came out. ChatGPT 5 is going to come out at the end of the year. God knows what 6, 7, and 8 are going to look like. And then there's all the other ones, Claude and so on, all the other LLMs that are coming out. It's amazing what's happening here. And it's getting to the point where these LLMs are almost at artificial general intelligence. It's remarkable, and it's fun to watch. But besides fun to watch, it's very, very useful. Now, this paper came out last year out of the UCSF group, and just documenting that their on-call junior residents spent 9 hours of their shift using electronic health records. So it's all of this Epic fatigue and Cerner fatigue. It's amazing how much time our residents spend interacting with the EHR. But it's not just the residents, it's the nurses, it's the PAs, it's the attending neurosurgeons. We're all sort of, it's almost like we don't work for the medical institution anymore. We work for our Outlook calendar and for Epic. So there are ways to tame these beasts. There are ways to make this easier on us. And most of these are going to be AI solutions. A lot of this right now, I have to say, Mayo Clinic is deeply, deeply invested. It's part of the reason why I moved to Mayo Clinic as an AI enthusiast. At this point, Mayo Clinic is invested tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in AI solutions. They have contracts with Google and Microsoft. Mo Biden is really deeply into this with the neuroinformatics program. We've just invited him down as visiting professor, and there's 10 million clean patient charts to base all of the AI investigations on. So Mayo's not the only one invested in this. University of California system's deeply into this. Harvard is deeply into it. Northwestern's getting into it. There's a lot of people really investing in AI in healthcare. And some of the solutions for our residents that are stuck with the EHR, and again, so are all of us. Some of it's things like ambient listening technology. So rather than having to type in a note or dictate a note, the note is dictated for you with these ambient listening technologies. We just trialed Suki, where there's another product that I'm going to start trialing next week. These are remarkable devices whereby you walk into the room, you put your phone down, the phone listens to the conversation, gets rid of any extraneous conversation. So if you're talking about, your patient's grandkids or the latest hockey game or whatever, all of that is out, and they put together a nice medical note based on listening to the conversation you did. You then edit and accept, and there you go. Your note is done. This is going to save us a lot of time. This just came out in Nature Medicine a few months ago, using LLMs to summarize clinical text information. We're going to be doing this. We're trialing this at Mayo, Florida in a couple of months. We're the beta testing site for the surgical programs within the Mayo system. And our program is going to be using these. So any patient with a large chart, whether they were transferred in with a large chart, we're going to be summarizing it for the physicians, or somebody who's been in the hospital for a long time and new physicians are coming on. There's going to be a summary generated via this AI program. This is very exciting. It's going to be a time saver. It's going to be, I think, a satisfier for anybody that interacts with EHR, and that's everybody. Other ones that we're rolling out through Mayo, Florida, and the Mayo system is summarizing discharge summaries and operative reports. All of this is underway. It turns out that it can be done with every bit as accuracy as a medical expert. So discharge summaries are no longer going to be a burden. It's going to be done in conjunction with AI, and also coding. The coding is difficult for neurosurgeons to keep track of. I'm talking about specifically US-based coding. And our coding system and the payment system in the United States is so ridiculously complicated. It's one of the strongest arguments for universal healthcare in the United States. But AI is going to help us with our coding as well. And then interactions with patients. I have no doubt, in fact, I know it's going to be happening because we're rolling it out at Mayo, Florida. And this is going to be interacting with your patients in your in-basket. So when patients text you with questions, the first iteration of that answer is going to be, at least we're trialing this, is going to be written by an AI. You're going to look it over and then accept, edit, or delete. This came out of JAMA Internal Medicine last year. This was physicians answering questions to patients on an open Reddit forum versus an AI doing the same. The AI was rated by physician experts as 3 times more informative than the physician expert, and also 10 times more likely to be rated as highly empathetic. So these are things that are coming our way. These AI programs are going to be used in our interactions with patients. So I'm not the only one enthused about AI in neurosurgery. You can see this exponential graph here of AI-related publications in neurosurgery. Taking a look at AI literature in neurosurgery right now, this is a nice paper put together by Michael Ivan and his team down at the University of Miami. Just taking a look at where are the publications coming from. There's a scattering from all over the world, but it tends to be largely of the West, with the United States leading right now, and then the Far East. The institutions doing it, it's Harvard, it's the California system, it's Mayo, it's Northwestern. And this is the evolution of what AI topics are being covered in neurosurgery, just starting initially with surgery, machine learning, and so on. And then it just went into everything. Essentially, all of the subspecialties are now investigating their fields with AI programs. So when you decide I mean, if you're taking a look at an AI related paper, how do you read it? How do you judge it? Well, the answer to that is it's much like any standard program. You take a look at it. I mean, are the questions asked reasonable and answerable? Was the data set complete? Was it clean data? And then, did they answer the question they were looking at? The difficulty really is in interpretability because the inner workings of AI is a bit of a black box. I have a whole different presentation on how AI comes to the answers that it comes to within the black box, and it's all evolving towards neural networks. There's other ways of doing it, like the Monte Carlo setting, the Monte Carlo system that DeepMind used for AlphaZero. Now, there's a lot of different ways it can be done, but it does seem to be evolving towards convoluted neural networks and much larger neural networks over time. And that causes a lot more expense, time, and frankly, energy used in computing. Right now, 10% of the energy used in the world right now is computing energy, and that's growing rapidly. And then in taking a look at AI papers in neurosurgery, when you look at it and you compare it to our tripod compliance that we hold our other statistical models to, AI papers tend to be pretty good with this compliance, with the exception of external validation. Only 15% of the AI papers in the last 5 years published in neurosurgery have any sort of external validation. And again, that makes it difficult to figure out, well, what do you do with this data? I mean, how do you interpret that data? Is it reliable? And in reality, most of the time, when we find something that an AI program figured out, we have to find a way to externally validate it. There are ways to inquire within the AI program itself, but oftentimes it just leads to another study to try to get to a validation of the idea that the AI came up with. In regards to education, because this is an education seminar, and we're talking about things like simulation and ergonomics and so on. So let's talk about education. Education in the old days looked like this. These are all old books that my former partners left me from neurosurgery. This was the way neurosurgeons learned in the past. There was almost no video. This is a picture from the Society of Neurological Surgeons from about 75 years ago. This is how neurosurgeons learned. I mean, there's almost no video. They'd have to go and watch surgeons operate. Nowadays, there's simulation. We do a lot of simulation, and it turns out these simulators are very good. Of course, there's a lot of variability of what's good and what's not so good, but generally speaking, in surgery, simulation works. Of course, some simulators are better than others. These are just a variety of simulation projects that I've been involved in. I was involved in the SNS resident courses for a decade. We did a lot of simulation work through the SNS. The hardest thing, of course, to simulate is going to be communication and professionalism. That's quite a different challenge. But through the SNS courses, there were so many different simulators that we trialed. We did our best to train our residents before they ever touched a patient on a variety of different simulators, whether it's microsurgical or spine-based. These are our early efforts. And then, of course, COVID hit, and then we had to do it all virtually. We did our best virtually, but there's really nothing quite like in-person simulation. We've gotten back to in-person simulation in the SNS courses this year. And in regards to neurosurgical simulators, we are, I'd say, a good decade behind the general surgeons, but we're working on it. This is the SNS AI and Neurosurgery Task Force, and we're specifically looking at education. And education, of course, means simulation in neurosurgery. It's led by Omar Arno at Harvard, and it's been fun working with all these people. Sam Broud is a leader in simulation at University of Washington. There's a digital neurosurgery program that he put on this past year that was excellent. But we're all working on making our simulation AI-based and more sophisticated in neurosurgery. And we're doing a project right now. We finally got clearance to do a project with the ABNS, taking a look. We're our first toe in the water of looking at the ABNS data set is going to be based on coding. And the reason is it's just de-identified data, so there's very little risk of any sort of data leak. But the ABNS POST system, this for those outside the United States, the POST system is neurosurgeons in the United States have to submit the data and the imaging from the first 125 cases in their career to be reviewed by ABNS directors in order to sit for your oral board's examination. So over the last decade in collecting all these cases, there's now 155,000 cases with imaging and follow-up, 90-day follow-up in this system. So it's a very, very rich data set of people early in their career and what they're doing in neurosurgery in the United States. So it's a really, really rich data set for us to take a look at with artificial intelligence. We're starting off with coding. After we prove that it's safe and that there's no data issues, no data leak issues, we'll start looking at the clinical data as well. Like I said, we're about a decade behind the general surgeons in AI training and simulation training, in part because AI requires digitizable, analyzable, unambiguous data. And that really means visual data, it means digital video. So much of what's done in general surgery is done through the laparoscope. So they have these massive data sets of surgeons doing actual surgery, surgeons doing simulated surgery on simulators, and they can compare experts with non-experts, with senior residents, junior residents, medical students, novices, etc. And then they can determine, looking at all of this and then using external validation to figure out who's good and why. What makes a good surgeon? And not too surprisingly, what makes a good surgeon in general surgery is very similar to what makes a good surgeon in neurosurgery. And it has a lot to do with efficiency and flow and bimanual dexterity and the flow of the operation. And then speed is a byproduct of it, but not a primary product of it. This is from JAMA. This is taking a look at, again, just how general surgeons take all of this data, segment the data, track it all the way through an AI program, and then look back once it's externally validated and to say, how can we take a look at our trainees and tell our trainees how to get better in neurosurgery? And so it's just taking the implicit and making it explicit. We can all look at somebody operate and say, this person's really good, but it's hard to explain why. Well, guess what? AI is really good at explaining the why. So this is here's another paper, AI in general surgery, just taking a look at an AI simulator with trainees going through. The bottom line is it makes them safer. It makes them more efficient. As a byproduct of becoming safer and more efficient, initially it makes them slower. But because they're safe and efficient, they'll eventually get faster. Here's one of the early efforts in neurosurgery here. And they're looking at expert surgeons versus residents versus medical students and just demonstrating the learning curve and demonstrating what we think makes a better surgeon and how long it takes to get somebody trained up. We did some of this in neurosurgery. This is Bernard Bendock's microvascular anastomosis simulator. We did this through the SNS courses for about a half a decade. We collected a lot of data on it, and that data helped us to train trainers to teach things like microsurgery. But it also gives us a backlog of video information that we'll be analyzing, and it's going to allow us to use an AI program looking forward. So the SNS AI task force is going to be looking at anything that's digitizable. So pituitary surgery on video endoscopic third ventriculostomy, anything that is on video is possible. Now, this, of course, is expensive, and there's a ton of data collected. And that's why it has to be centralized, which is why we're doing it through the SNS, because it'd be very expensive for individual programs to try to do this themselves. And now, finally, I'm just going to wrap up because it's 7:30 here on the East Coast with a quote that I find fascinating. John von Neumann was one of the originators of the computer and also of artificial intelligence. And this, for any neuroscientist, this has got to be exciting. When we talk about mathematics, we may be discussing a secondary language built on the primary language of the nervous system. That sort of circular logic for a neuroscientist is absolutely fascinating. But when you look at what the brain is and how it's constructed, and you realize that it's about 100,000 individual units that are their own AI program that all work in conjunction with each other. As a neuroscientist, you can't help but be fascinated with artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rich. Absolutely fascinating. And, just as you were listing all the possible applications and, you try to imagine where we might be in a few years, just there is no limit. When I look at technology, I'm always, also fascinated by the ability of technology to, in a way, have the potential of democratize healthcare across the globe. Because I think, like to your opinion about this, applications of these newer technologies might be actually, in a way, easier in those places where more traditional ways of delivering care are not so established. I look, for example, at the digitalization of banking. It's really taken off in areas of Africa where there was not a well-developed, more traditional model of banks with the branches, local branches everywhere. And when I think about something like this, it's really, it has really a great ability to improve healthcare at the global level because it would make it easier to. What's your take on that particular aspect? We have at this point more than 90 participants from all over corners of the globe.
Mm-hmm. I would completely agree with you. I'll just give an example right now. If you have a tough case and you want advice, and let's say you're in a place where you're relatively isolated, there's not a lot of senior neurosurgeons around. Well, you can just go to Atlas GPT and put in the details of your case, and you're going to get a very thorough, cogent response in how, based on neurosurgical literature alone, how you might consider handling that case. That is now instantly available. You've got a second opinion available right now as of 10 days ago. That'll only get better. There'll be more programs that'll come out. There's going to get to a point, in fact, Atlas GPT is planning on it, where you can enter the volumetric data of the MRI scan or MRA scan or whatever you need to do, and that volumetric data would then be analyzed by the program, and it could give you very, very detailed answers about, yeah, you might consider doing this, but be careful because the third nerve is probably pushed up, and watch out for the anterior choroidal, it's sitting on top of the tumor. That's coming. And I'm not talking about in the distant future. This year, that's coming. And then as far as things like you're isolated, you have general neurologist, you don't have an epileptologist, you're going to have an AI program. who's going to be able to interpret that EEG and do it very, very quickly and for very little expense. So all of this is already done. It's coming. As far as dealing with and wrestling with electronic health records, that's all in trial right now. Within a year, it's going to be used through the Mayo system. It's going to be used through other systems that are trialing it, and then it's going to spread everywhere. And I do think it's going to make everyone's life a little easier in navigating the healthcare the way it is, and freeing us up a little bit from these electronic health record overlords.
The other thing is that the profound effects that this has on education. Like if I look at development of imaging and how it changed neurology, for example, in the 50 years ago, you need to be a superb neurologist and knowing all the little signs and come up with the differential. Nowadays, that is, in a way obsolete. You get an MRI and you get your answer right away. So should medical schools compress the curriculum and so much emphasis on differential diagnosis? Probably it's it's really not going to be. Nowadays patients come in very difficult problems to diagnose: CSF hypotension, Cushing disease. The patient, they put their symptoms on Google, they come in and say, doctor, I think I have this disease. How can we make sure that the education, and I've always been obsessed a little bit to try to compress, probably because it took me from 89 to 2000 to 13 years before I could actually be a neurosurgeon on my own, 13 years of postgraduate education. How can we compress, and how can we make sure that our education system is on par with the technology and make those changes without letting the market or the technology eventually forces us to make those changes in a way? How can we be proactive? What's your take on that?
So that's a great question. Both of my daughters are in medical school right now. Both of them went to tech-heavy colleges, engineering colleges, and I insisted that they learn how to code, and they do. I insisted that they learn how to use AI in healthcare, and they do. And there are AI and healthcare elective courses in medical school, and my daughters, of course, did those. And they're going to be they're looking at the future. It's always best to look forward. Don't worry about what happened in the past. You can always study history but right now look at what's coming. And it's distressing to see. One of my daughters just finished boards part 1. It's still so memorization based. It's really kind of embarrassing. A quarter of the test is biochemistry memorization. That is not the future. So that's everyone in America has to take that test. That needs to be changed. I can tell you, as a member of the ABNS, we've gotten away from memorizing factoids on our written boards. In fact, as soon as I sign off here, I'm writing 10 questions for the written boards. And they're not factoids. They're things you have to think about. They're things you have to be that are clinically relevant. We've gone through our entire question data set and gotten rid of anything that's memorization based. So we're better than the boards part 1. The medical schools are behind right now in this. At least the medical schools my daughters are at. But you're right. It's got to be more about not memorizing. It's thinking through. There's a concept in AI called Moravec's paradox. Moravec's paradox is that AI is good at things that humans are bad at, and humans are good at things that AI is bad at. So don't worry about being replaced by AI anytime soon. Okay, maybe 50, 100 years from now we'll be replaced. But for right now, we need AI and AI needs us, because there are certain blind spots that AI programs have that are easily identifiable and horrible blind spots that can lead to bad outcomes in healthcare. So it needs us. We need to change our curriculum to work with AI, because students now, they'll use ChatGPT or Claude or any of the other ones to get answers very quickly. They use it all the time. It's second nature to medical students now. They're already moving past memorization. We need to get the medical students to move with, or the medical schools to move with them.
Thanks. Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Vanessa.
Yeah, Dr. Byrne, many participants are asking about the link to get to the Atlas GPT. Is it atlasmedtech.com?
Yes,
it's
a product with between Atlas GPT and MedTech. Aaron Cohen-Gadol is if you can take a look at his Neurosurgical Atlas website. It's fabulous. Aaron was again disclosure. He was also a Mayo Clinic resident, but it's really, really good. Take a look at that website. You'll see you can query it for any neurosurgical problem, and it'll give you, I think, a pretty good description of what you might consider doing.
And for the SNS AI task force that you mentioned, are you also using numbers in functional neurosurgery, for example, like the targeting that we have before and after, to see how accurate we can get depending on the symptoms of the patients? So are you also looking into that, or only videos, as you mentioned?
Well, right now, I mean, the SNS AI task force is entirely education based, because the SNS is the Academic Society of America. It's the senior education leaders in America. So it's all education based. There are other interest groups in AI out there, and it tends to be a lot of the same people that are popping up in the AANS. But we're entirely looking at simulation-based education and querying large neurosurgical databases.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your talk. I was going to ask how you are using your day-by-day life, and you already mentioned that you are teaching your daughters also to use artificial intelligence.
Well, yeah, I mean, the presentation you saw, a lot of the slides and the way the transitions, all of that was AI based. I use it all the time. In fact, the written boards, the group at NYU is actually writing questions now for our written boards in the United States. And those questions will be rolled out for medicals, for neurosurgical residents next year. They're not going to be scored yet, though. We're going to see how they do on AI-based written questions. And you know, it's difficult to write neurosurgical board questions. It's quite a bit harder than you think to write a cogent question that already hasn't been written about before, because we've got a massive data set of questions. Coming up with a new question is not easy. It's simple for an AI program. They can pop these questions out, and they're reasonable questions very quickly. So we are going to be trialing that next year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Rich. And the next presenter is Dr.